Hi, and welcome to the C Team. This is Mike Curley.
And this is Frank Curley.
And today we're talking about, what are we talking about? We're talking about the last of the 3 Marvel movies to come out this year.
Yeah, we're not going to do the same thing we did with Wonder Woman, run down the whole DC things, because DC had, 3 movies?
Yeah, there's a lot more Marvel to go over. So we will take these in... Is it in chronological order, or am I getting mixed up again?
Basically, start with Guardians, then Spider-Man,
all right.
Thor.
So one of the movies that came out this year, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, sequel to the hit from 2014 or 2015?
I forget.
Whatever. But Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one was kind of an unexpected gem, partly because...
Yeah.
No one really knew who the hell these characters were in the first place. They were not entirely obscure, but they were not the headliners at Marvel.
People said that Iron Man is like a C-lister because you hear about Spider-Man and
the X-Men
and the X-Men, long before you hear about everyone else. But really, these are even more obscure than that.
Yeah, the Guardians of the Galaxy was kind of the movie came about during Marvel for a long time. The movies were basically let's throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Basically, and
one of the creative directors brought the Guardians of the Galaxy up. And, they gave him free reign to make the movie. And, the style of it, the acting, it was probably the funniest at the time Marvel movie, starring, Chris Pratt, who's mainly been known for comedies at this point. And it was a very refreshing and kind of a fresh look at the universe because it wasn't so directly connected with everything. It wasn't on Earth.
Yeah.
It was connected with Thanos and the whole Infinity Stone thing, but it was kind of its own standalone story, more or less.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, one of the things I really like about Marvel is they're letting the creative team just do their work. There was some meddling with Age of Ultron. Joss Whedon apparently butt heads a lot during that, but for the most part, they let the Guardians of the Galaxy be the Guardians of the Galaxy. They let the Avengers be the Avengers. Yeah,
each movie has its own, and each setting really in the movies has its particular tone. There is a similarity to some extent. Everybody's a smartass. There's a but it's a very down to earth kind of thing. But each movie takes its own cues. Ant-Man was a heist film. Doctor Strange was more your high fantasy, like Thor. Yeah. Iron Man is straight science fiction. So they kind of each do their own thing and then come together for something greater.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much everyone's a smartass.
Everyone is a smartass, though.
Well, you have the absolute king smartass, Tony Stark. But what they do with Captain America, for instance, is they have the fish out of water thing, and where it's insufferable in almost every other movie they try that. It ends up being kind of charming. He's legit. He was like, okay, I got to check out Star Wars / Trek.
Yeah, because he takes it in stride because he realizes and acknowledges that he's the fish out of water, where I think a lot of places where it fails is where the character is the fish out of water, but they don't really realize it. They just keep going as if they're still in the water.
Yeah, they're kind of like just bumbling through rather than trying to absorb what's going on.
Whereas Cap he had a close encounter with Tony Stark, and he realized he's got to keep up if he wants to have any idea what the hell this guy's saying.
Yeah.
So he immediately started catching up, and and that is kind of they make the occasional joke about him being like a senior citizen, but other than that, they don't really. They kind of Winter Soldier is where they kind of had Steve get over that whole thing. So. But anyway, moving on. We were talking about Guardians of the Galaxy.
We could go on for decades on Marvel up to this point. But
so the fact that Volume 2 was basically a sure thing the instant Volume 1, the first movie, came out. It was a smash hit. Many considered it maybe the best Marvel movie at the time.
Yeah,
it's definitely up there in the running with the Avengers. So, the second one, what do we want to say about Volume 2?
Well, I think it's in some ways an improvement over the first movie. Well, one point, Gamora I felt was better characterized. She had a backstory and everything else in the first one, but like we first kind of meet her, she's kind of like a sly thief, and then she becomes uptight and curses out Chris Pratt for being a thief, and then he's like pleading for her life when confronted with Yondu. When I kind of felt she could have been a bit more hostile. I don't know. She kind of like went all over the place. The second one brought her more to the forefront, and especially between her and Nebula, and I felt she was just overall better written as a character.
See, the first one, I didn't think she was all that inconsistent. I think she kind of. I think me and Frank differ on this, where I think she was okay in the first one. I think part of it is the first one. Partly is the difference. The second one, they're not really under like the stressful time constraint of the first one. The first one, it was like a race, get the stone, keep it from Ronan, save the galaxy. This one, they're kind of like more relaxed, so you see a lot more of the slower character development of the characters.
Right.
So I think you get to probably the second one, you get to see more of who she is rather than what she is.
Yeah, well, I think the main disadvantage Gamora has is that she's surrounded by Drax, Rocket.
Yeah, she's kind of the straight man of the whole thing. She's got to deal with an idiot from Earth, Rocket, a talking baby tree, and Drax, and she is like, oh my God, how did I end up on this ship? I mean, she clearly likes most of them.
Maybe not Rocket.
Yeah, maybe not Rocket. But she loves Groot. She gets along with Peter. I feel like Drax has kind of like gotten over his vendetta and stuff in the first one, so they get along reasonably well. But like she's definitely the beleaguered mother of the group.
Yeah.
And
it's like, Groot, go over there. Hi.
Yeah. I love that Groot turns them all into like responsible parents for like about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Just by sheer proximity. But then it's back to like, the usual jackassery.
Actually, I'd like to call back on one theory on the first one for a second. Basically, that it's a D&D game played by the Avengers. Because I was showing it to my girlfriend. I thought she was going to find Rocket... well, actually, this is for the second movie. Taking my girlfriend there, I thought she was going to find Rocket completely insufferable. But then after the movie, she goes, you know what that was like? That was like the very stubbornly, chaotic evil person in the group. Or neutral evil, character in the group that just won't compromise for, like, no reason.
Yeah, he's kind of almost a Belcar Bitterleaf kind of guy from the Order of the Stick, where he's not evil per se, but definitely self-serving.
Yeah.
I mean, he steals shit, and excuse my French. He steals things, I should say.
Watch your goddamn language. We're on the podcast. I was about to say radio.
Radio podcast. Potato.
like a major league. No one's listening.
Potato, tomato. Anyway, so yeah, I feel like the second movie definitely does give them more time for character development, and part of that is like any sequel, there's kind of a sequence that any series of movies goes with. In the first one, you usually have everybody meeting each other, and you have to establish each character, who they are, what they can do, and the conflict, which puts the movie in a rush in a lot of ways. Where the second movie, you start with them established, they know each other, so you can see more of them interacting in a less stressful, more familial environment. And a lot of movies will do that. X-Men, Spider-Man, and any kind of ensemble, really. Like the second Avengers, that movie picks up with them as a well-oiled team and friends.
Yeah.
So I like seeing those kinds of like things.
It follows a pattern of like superhero. Usually good superhero movies, they usually just come in pairs with a third. Well, as it used to be, the third one kind of melting away. But usually the first one introduces it. This, origin, all that. The second one, like say the Dark Knight. Dark Knight is just Batman being Batman.
Yeah. The second one is more of the second one. The second movie is usually more in line with the kind of stories and development and character you would see in the ongoing comic book.
Right.
Because if you pick up a Batman comic now, he's not going to talk about his dead parents unless it's like a specific story to that, because that's origin that's already been taken care of. You're going to see the slice of life how he's doing now, and so that's kind of where the second movie is. And the third movie, they always do these things as a trilogy, so the third movie is always something that totally disrupts the status quo, and that's been the case in Marvel too, except they've actually done a good job of it.
Yeah,
where.
Previously,
Iron Man, the third movie, he blows up his suits and
his house, and
yeah, everything blows up. Captain America, the third movie, the Avengers are split, and he's in hiding, and then the third Thor movie, which we'll talk about later, is Ragnarok, and Ragnarok doesn't end well for anybody if you know anything about the myths.
Yeah.
So yeah. But usually in previous attempts, this has not gone over well. It's usually been that the third movie tries and then doesn't really work out.
Well, and I think the argument, science fiction versus science fantasy.
Yeah,
I kind of feel this is more towards science fiction because they're taking their time and exploring sci-fi tropes. I mean, there's definitely the fantastical element to it, but exploring being part of like a physical god. It kind of explores the mind of someone who has eternity and looking for a purpose. And that's kind of one of the things I appreciate. There is big space battle at the end. As per usual with a series called Guardians of the Galaxy, but that's definitely part of the slow burn thing you would see more in the Star Trek show as opposed to the films.
Yeah, I think one of the best things about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is it's gone on so long and well enough that they feel comfortable with doing those kinds of stories, with taking their time and disrupting the status quo and not just keeping up with it.
Yeah, and
so back to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. In this one, we see a lot of that mid-level or like mid-story development of the characters, with particularly Rocket and Star-Lord, Gamora, as we mentioned, and Yondu even. Not so much Drax. He kind of got over his stuff in the first one, so he is mostly he's a lot of comic relief in the second one, which is a nice change of pace because a lot of times movies will take the guy who's obsessed with revenge
and just crank it up,
and that will be his whole thing. But here it's kind of showing that it's showing how he has developed since the first movie, and the rest of them are kind of developing into that family unit.
It is interesting how distant this movie is from the overarching plot, like Thanos and all that.
Yeah, almost every other movie except for Spider-Man has had an Infinity Stone involved, and the first Guardians of the Galaxy had an Infinity Stone and Thanos directly involved. But this one, he just doesn't show up.
Yeah, it's interesting that the one about the physical god really doesn't. It looks like unless Star-Lord pulls some god thing out of his ass later on.
I think he can't at this point.
Yeah, but it is interesting how that end up kind of being nothing.
Yeah, it was more, despite the fact the galaxy is at stake toward the end, it was a much more intimate story than the first one, or a lot of the bigger episodes of the MCU.
Yeah. And of the three this year, I personally feel this is the strongest entry. The most coherent narrative, we'll go over Spider-Man, but Spider-Man just kind of jumps from one place to another. Yeah,
that's what he does.
Yeah, but and I kind of feel it's the one that really balances goofiness and seriousness.
Yeah, it doesn't it's a goofy movie. It's ridiculous in a lot of ways, and nobody really, they take things seriously, but even the big dramatic dialogue is kind of tinged with that comic booky goofiness, but at the same time, it doesn't detract from the dramatic moments. I think it accents it when the characters get serious, that they can get serious.
Yeah, and Kurt Russell is great. I think he's probably my favorite villain this year.
Yeah, he was clearly having a lot of fun, and I always say I like the movies. The movie is always better when the people involved with it are enjoying themselves, and clearly Kurt Russell was having a blast.
Yeah.
How often does he get to be like a planet? I mean, how big of a... Talk about your large hams.
My daddy was a planet. Oh, yeah, I almost forgot about him.
Oh, yeah, Zardu Hasselfrau.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Guardians of the Galaxy is definitely Marvel taking the opportunity to kind of cut loose and be silly. But still doing what Marvel does best, still being able to tell the dramatic and heartfelt stories and giving it stakes while keeping it fun.
Yeah. So, I think we've kissed that particular ass well enough.
It's a pretty well-formed ass, I would say.
Yeah.
But moving on, the
Zoe
next...
Saldana. Anyway.
Next on our list, of course, as we mentioned, Spider-Man Homecoming, the third attempt at
knock on wood,
Spider-Man movies, and I think it was a pretty solid entry.
Yeah,
I think it was. Definitely better, I would say, than the Raimi movies.
Yeah, by far.
I'm not sure. I want to see how the character develops before I can really judge on the Amazing series, because I liked that series pretty well.
Yeah, I that was. Okay, I know we cut down part of the rant, but I want to say this part. Like, so I think Amazing Spider-Man 2 got far more hate than it deserved. And they kind of jumped the gun with Spider-Man. Like, I know everyone hates Spider-Man 3, but I kind of feel that, it doesn't deserve the hate that it gets. And I recall, like, X-Men gave us 2 god-awful movies in a row.
Wait, which ones were god-awful?
Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but X-Men 3 and then Wolverine's Origins.
Okay. They were subpar. I thought you were talking about First Class. I kind of.
Oh no! I love First Class.
I kind of forgot that Origins Wolverine existed for a moment.
I think a lot of people prefer to, but somehow they bounced back.
Well, because they gave it back to Bryan Singer largely.
Yeah.
Or at least first Days of Future Past.
Well, he was the producer of First Class.
Right. So they gave it back to him.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and that was way too premature that they pulled a plug on Amazing Spider-Man 2. That I feel they should have kept it going. But we're talking about Homecoming.
Part of that has to do with the deal with Marvel movies to use Spider-Man in those movies, which people have been clamoring for ages. And Spider-Man is kind of, a character who does work well in a larger MCU. I think part of the reason for the original movies is it kind of gives him context, where Spider-Man is a street level hero, and I think part of the benefits of being part of the MCU is that Spider-Man has always had crossovers. He's always been with other heroes helping him out or him helping them out. And having him as part of the MCU, I feel lets you tell the smaller Spider-Man story instead of being the whole city and world is at stake every time, because it kind of places him within that larger framework, and therefore you can tell a more typical Spider-Man story. And Homecoming is a much more, I would say, typical Spider-Man story than the previous movies have been.
I would argue that having the greater world of superheroes does kind of make some Spider-Man stories hard to justify, like him being, down on his luck all the time when he knows Iron Man personally. Or I don't know if he works absolutely best in a team. I mean, he works in a team.
He works as equally as well in a team and on his own. I'm just saying, as context for the larger world he's in, him as a hero, like him as one of several heroes in New York, kind of more justifies him being so like kind of happy-go-lucky and joking and fanboyish as he is in Homecoming. And I think it basically lets them use the younger Spider-Man instead of jumping him up to like senior year in college like the previous movies had.
Yeah. I think time will tell. Because Spider-Man was kind of like introduced late in the whole plan.
Yeah, and which is ironic because he was one of the first Marvel comic heroes.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely convinced that he's necessary. Like, I know he's Marvel's basically Superman or Batman, whichever you want to go by. But I'm in the greater plan, he does feel like kind of shoved in.
Yeah, like they clearly they hadn't intended for him originally because they didn't have the rights, but I think they wanted to for a long time. And even in the Amazing Spider-Man series, they wanted to show the Avengers Tower in the first movie. The whole thing with all the cranes all over the city, they were going to explain that as being cleanup after the Avengers. So there has been some talk of crossovers and stuff like that for a while. And Spider-Man is Marvel Comics. He is the original, superhero with like real life problems. He was like the flagship hero who saved the world and then like got dumped or couldn't ask his girl out. So he represents I've talked about this before, the whole the men versus the gods.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man embodies the stories about the man. You're watching Spider-Man, yes, for the high-flying acrobatics, for the special effects and stuff, but you're also watching it for Peter Parker. And Peter Parker is as big a part of Spider-Man as anything.
I will say, okay, I did really like Spider-Man Homecoming. It's probably the Spider-Man film I enjoyed the most. Yes,
it was a lot of fun, if nothing else.
Yeah, I like this version of MJ. I mean, other than not being Kirsten Dunst. Kind of remind me of Kim Pine from Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, there's definitely that kind of annoyed, mad at the world hipster vibe to her. And this is definitely the Spider-Man where Spider-Man is having fun with it.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of that in Amazing, but this one, for the most part, until he loses the suit, Peter Parker's just having a blast. Yeah. He enjoys it. He's good at it, and it's kind of nice to see a Spider-Man where he's not vilified by the media, where people see Spider-Man and as much as I love the J. Jonah Jameson character and J.K. Simmons was fantastic, I think that it's good to see at least that portion of Spider-Man, maybe, because it's a little ridiculous with YouTube and the internet that one guy with a grudge at the newspaper could turn the whole city against him.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Go ahead.
So, the one downside I have of the movie, I don't feel like I know we've gone through Uncle Ben's death a few times now, but I kind of feel we don't really know his backstory at all. Like, I mean,
well, we do, because it's the same as he got bit by a spider. Uncle Ben's dead.
Yeah, but
great responsibility.
How'd he die though? Like, this isn't
the same spider.
So he has like a different set of poison. It's like, okay, you die, you get powers.
Yeah.
So, but he doesn't really come across as a character whose uncle's death is his fault specifically.
Well, I think I think they say in the movies, at least as far as Civil War, he's been Spider-Man for about 6 months. So I think it's something that's happened further enough in the past that it's not something that's like weighing on his mind every day. And you're right, they don't put a lot of the responsibility on it. And they don't really mention it in the movie, probably mostly because they go over it in Civil War. He has the speech. He basically has the great power and great responsibility speech to Tony Stark in Civil War, so they don't rehash it in his own movie. They do make some reference. There's a line in there about how he can't hurt Aunt May because she's been through a lot already, and obviously Uncle Ben is just not there.
Well, like, he didn't say already, but like what she's going through right now, which still doesn't tell us a whole lot. The whole like great power, great responsibility speech. That's still, I mean, we kind of expect it, but that still doesn't tell us a whole lot. And I think a scene, maybe him visiting Uncle Ben's grave, or like not completely retelling, but at least show us, okay, that's what's going on.
I think it's not necessary at this point because we've gone over it like 3 times already, where the first Spider-Man movie did it fine because that's origin story. And then they bring it back in the 3rd movie to rehash it again, and then Amazing did it again. I think it's just we know he's dead.
Well, but
the exact details of how Uncle Ben dies, I don't think are as important as telling the story of who Spider-Man is now.
Well, this is like I said, this doesn't come across as Spider-Man. It doesn't come across as a Spider-Man who has been really traumatized at all. Like he kind of feels like he's, being Spider-Man because, hey, I'm the cool thing now, rather than having like, much motivation. Like, barring Civil War, I'm saying Homecoming didn't really show us much as far as motivation.
Well,
and that was his movie. And Uncle Ben's death is a very important part of his story.
It is, but it's one that's been told 3 times in the last 10 years. I think that my take on it is Spider-Man, yes, it is something that motivates him, but Spider-Man as a character going forward is a positive character. He's not someone who dwells on it all the time. It's something he's not a maudlin, gloomy, brooding Batman, oh, my parents are dead. It affects him. It does. It motivates him. But from day to day, it's not something that's constantly being brought up.
Yeah, I'm not even saying like dwell on it. Just like maybe like a picture of him like in the house.
I think there was. I want to say there probably was in the background somewhere. Yeah. They just didn't want to make a big deal of it because they already had several times.
But I do have.
It's the same reason that the new DCEU didn't like tell an origin story for Batman, although never mind, they kind of did in Batman versus Superman, but Batman is more of a character who it is constantly weighing on his mind, whereas I feel like Homecoming was still kind of teaching Peter responsibility, but just in a different way, because a lot of his growth in the movie is growing to be the character who is a hero because for the right reasons, as opposed to just because this is a cool thing to do.
Well, I do have a prediction on Uncle Ben, if we go over that at all. That's basically that he was killed during Avengers 1. It wasn't specifically Peter Parker's fault, but since he got the powers, he kind of has like, it's kind of like a wish fulfillment thing for him that he should have been able, he could have done something that day.
That would make sense, and it would be an interesting way to tie it into the larger MCU. My prediction is they're just not going to address it directly. There might be some reference in maybe a subsequent movie to something like, since Ben died, it's just been us, or something like that, or something. I think that Uncle Ben has been done to death, and although maybe, I don't know, maybe Infinity War, there'll be some kind of weird flashback thing. But I think Uncle Ben has just been done to death. People are tired of seeing that old guy get shot. And I think they're just not going to... It's going to be something they hint at and make vague references to, but I don't think it's going to be a central part of the story.
Well, I kind of feel it at least should be addressed. Like, not dwelled on, just, mentioned. Because, like I said, it's hardly even, like, acknowledged.
Yeah, fair enough.
And again, and it is as an important part of... yes, we did see the other Spider-Man do this, but we still need to do something.
I don't think it's necessary. I think the movie works fine without it, and I think it's he's moved on, and it would be less. Part of the charm of Spider-Man: Homecoming is that it is practically a comedy, and I think dwelling on that so much would take away from that.
Yeah. Though I will say, it was a pretty cool twist when Michael Keaton turns out to be her dad.
Yeah, I had not seen that coming. That's another thing. Like, Spider-Man: Homecoming does a lot with your expectations outside of the universe. A lot of the gotcha moments like that, and like who MJ is, they only really work because everyone knows Spider-Man so well.
Yeah, and like Liz, what jumped to mind is you see him at the door, and I think of Willem Dafoe on the answering machine, mocking Peter Parker, like, hey, I got her, and that immediately comes to mind. It's like, hey, come in. I was like, oh, yeah, crap.
It is a shock because the character Liz is Liz Allen, who is a well-known Spider-Man character, and Adrian Toomes, like, clearly they have different last names, and so it's kind of a meta twist where you might have seen it coming if you didn't know the characters. But because you do know the characters, because your brain fills in, okay, Liz, oh, that must be Liz Allen. because you can recognize that, it kind of catches you off guard.
Yeah.
And same thing with the reveal of who MJ is.
So one thing that caught my attention in the movie is one bit of dialogue. Peter Parker going, I just want to be like you guys, and Tony Stark goes, we need you to be better. And I came to realize something about the Avengers. The Avengers up to now basically killed without much of a second thought.
Yeah, half of them are soldiers. One is literally a walking box of guns. Yeah. One is the Hulk, who is not delicate, let's say.
Yeah,
and the other three are soldiers, like literally from war.
Yeah, and then you realize Spider-Man doesn't kill a single soul, even like the Vulture, even saves his life. Yeah. So I kind of feel like that is not only just about Spider-Man maturing, but about the Marvel universe almost kind of maturing. Going from like the the happy abandon of destroying shit to someone who takes a lot more responsibility, not only of people he cares about, but also of his villains. Yeah,
and there is definitely a marked contrast where like Peter turns on the suit and it has like an instant kill mode on it, and he clearly does not want to do that. So I think you're right that Tony at this point is trying to be more responsible for probably the first time in his life. And that's kind of Tony's arc after his own movies, especially with Age of Ultron and Civil War. Tony is trying to be better as a person and not just as like a something to blast people.
Yeah, he's basically slowing down as like, okay, I need to get off the field for a second and clean up stuff at home.
Yeah, he's got to clear the decks.
Especially with Pepper.
Yeah, that was nice seeing her in that, and because and it was a nice, funny, sweet little moment because you weren't expecting it. She wasn't in any of the advertising or anything like that, so it was nice to see Gwyneth Paltrow back in it.
Yeah,
and I think we're seeing a more maybe not mellow Tony, but a more responsible, a more mature. It's only taken him like 12 years, but a more mature Tony.
Yeah, and I think it was a good way to resolve that kind of love plot without it being like a major part of a film.
Yeah, because we've had a bunch of movies already with Tony and Pepper going back and forth, so it's nice to see they just kind of worked things out. And that's I think another thing that works well about Homecoming is that it's creating a world where things happen when the heroes are not watching.
Yeah,
where you're watching Spider-Man and other things happen. He doesn't have to be personally present to see every development. So I like that. It gives them more of a sense of a real living world when that happens.
Yeah, Dresden Files kind of does the same thing.
Yeah, and the Discworld was conceived. Terry Pratchett at one point said, he's like, I want a fantasy world that keeps going when you close the book. And it really was. Things progressed. And I think the MCU has been the same way in a lot of ways, where you see a character after a while and he's done things. He's changed things. Yeah. He didn't have to be on screen to do it. So now, the big test of... okay. Let's see how the movies compare. The movie Spider-Man Homecoming compares to the previous two attempts at Spider-Man.
Yeah, so, being Marvel's... I wrote...
Flagship, really.
Yeah, being Marvel's flagship. I wrote a much longer thing for this, but we cut it down a bit. But I think it's important to address because, Spider-Man is very important to Marvel. So, what do you feel is the best Spider-Man?
The best, I will say... I'm sorry, Tobey Maguire.
You suck.
But I'm not going to go that far. Yeah. I think part of it was the writing. He got some real crap lines to say as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And there were parts that, he could emote for. But I will say Andrew Garfield was the best Spider-Man and Peter Parker. He had better lines to deliver, and he delivered them well. Spider-Man in the comics he's a chatterbox. He never shuts the hell up. It's one of the things that annoys both his allies and his enemies. Probably in like the Avengers, the only person who annoys the Avengers more than Spider-Man is Deadpool.
Yeah.
There's a whole comic where they're all like, no, seriously, you're kind of annoying. Even Captain America's like, I didn't want to say anything, but...
I was going to talk to you about patience. Shut up, Deadpool.
Yeah, so I think Andrew Garfield did a much better job of translating that to the screen, of bringing in the quips and being able to do that. And Tom Holland does that, I think, too. Yeah. He has the sense of humor to deliver the Peter Parker and Spider-Man lines, and I think they're both just a better fit than Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, and
I'm not sure exactly how. I could go either way between Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield. I think they both played the character well. I think I liked Andrew Garfield more, but Tom Holland's growing on me.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't really a fair comparison because Tom Holland he's only had one movie, but I will say. Tom Holland probably of all the three love plots. I know the one from this movie gets next, but when they introduced MJ, I was like, I kind of want to see where this is going.
Yeah, because throughout the movie, she's kind of dropping hints. Like she's the one who says, "Oh, like." She rattles off the clubs that he's quit. It's like, oh no, it's not like I'm following you around. I just know these things. And she kind of drops hints that she's interested a couple times, and in a very subtle way. Like she doesn't go out of her way to do it. It's just kind of they're not even pitching it as like, oh, this is like her star-crossed true love. It's just kind of like, okay, he's kind of cute. I'm interested.
Yeah, and my problem with Gwen Stacy is. I admit I was kind of like, I like her and all. She's great, but when is she going to get killed off?
Yeah, there is there's
a bit of apathy there, and
there is always that expectation with Gwen Stacy. And in fact, they filmed in Amazing Spider-Man 2. They did film scenes with a Mary Jane character.
Yeah, when I heard of that, I was like, "Bye, Gwen."
Yeah, they ended up cutting her out of the movie, so it didn't look like they were just like discard and draw there. But I will say that. Peter and Gwen in the Amazing Spider-Man series did have good chemistry. They did seem like a couple who would be together.
Yeah.
They did, they much better than Mary Jane and Peter, who were kind of like strangled to each other.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of accepted it because Marvel was only like just getting the whole film groove in. And it was like, oh, it's Spider-Man and MJ. Yeah, of course they're together. But I think in retrospect, yeah, MJ was just a source of misery.
Yeah, she was just like, poor Peter is like just permanent resident of the friend zone. Yeah, just through his own stuff too. It's like he's like in one scene he wants her so much he's trying to read poetry, and the next, well, I can't because my enemies will find you.
Yeah, that was a lot of BS from the start.
Come on, Peter, just man up.
Yeah,
and it's here's the thing. Amazing Spider-Man, Peter and Gwen are together because they fit well together. In the Sam Raimi movies, Peter and MJ are together because they're Peter and MJ and they must be together.
Yeah. I should probably point out, Spider-Man 2 is probably my least favorite Spider-Man movie, so if I sound... I know that's a weird opinion, but I don't care. But I'm just saying, like, if I'm a little hostile toward that.
Wait, you like that less than the disco nerd in the third one?
See, I'll be honest, I'm kind of in between the two, as to which is worse. Don't kill me, internet. But the whole losing powers just because life's hard.
Yeah, that was a little weak.
Yeah, that was very bad. Again, Tobey Maguire, never liked him. His head always looks like he's about to explode every time he gets emotional.
He doesn't emote. He doesn't emote very well.
He doesn't eat motes either.
I hope not.
that would be kind of weird.
Just a bit. So I would say overall, Homecoming, very solid Spider-Man movie, very funny. I think it captures the tone of especially the early Spider-Man high school stories very well and just captures him as a character. And I do like seeing him in the larger universe because that's kind of where Spider-Man makes the most sense to me.
Yeah. So, yeah, keep it up, Holland, and...
yeah, good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck.
And hope no one drops your girlfriend off a bridge because that tends to happen a lot to Spider-Man.
And hope we don't pull the plug on your series.
Well, he's part of the MCU now, so I think it's got enough steam that even if he's in a real stinker, it'll keep going.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
It would take
it does feel a bit snake bit, doesn't it?
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I think he's in the right hands right now.
Two reboots already when Superman's only had one, really. I mean, and a couple of sequels that everyone wants to forget about, but
It's not about the amount of reboots; it's about where they end up.
yeah.
So, speaking of, well, actually, just speaking of the MCU, there's not really a good, elegant segue here. Thor Ragnarok.
Thor Ragnarok. So yeah, this is the third movie to come out, the third Marvel movie to come out this year.
And all the movies this year have been like really borderline comedies.
Yeah. Well, I've been kind of on and off about this movie for like we saw it last week. And again, a lot of like just mixed emotions about it. On the one hand, I do like how, it's like I've watched like a few like bizarre animated 80s films like Rock and Roll, another one you have to see.
Yeah.
Maybe while drunk. That'll help.
Yeah.
And
Heavy Metal.
Yeah, Heavy Metal. The Jeff Goldblum's character reminds me so much. Anyone's watched Heavy Metal, the den section, the flamboyant evil king. He just reminds me so much of that character. He was always just a joy to watch.
Well, a lot of the movie was like conscious reference. Like the guy said, the director said, if Queen was still performing and Freddie Mercury was alive, he would have wanted Freddie Mercury and Queen to do the soundtrack because Flash Gordon in particular was a big reference, and it really is kind of a throwback to 80s. To Jack Kirby, really, as a comic book artist.
Now I want this director to find a power metal band that will do that.
Oh, I'm sure anyone would jump at the chance. But like even the logo looks like an 80s arcade machine.
Yeah.
So it's very much a fun throwback movie to the 80s and all their ridiculous glory.
Yeah,
which is kind of puts it almost in the same vein as Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm not talking about like anime films like Disney or something. I mean the really obscure stuff that you will watch wondering what the hell just happened.
Yeah, there is definitely a sense of a kind of mishmashed future space in Thor Ragnarok, and it works because the context of the context of the MCU has provided that in Guardians of the Galaxy and in Thor previous to this.
Yeah, and it just mixes them so well. I want these guys to do a He-Man movie.
They kind of did. I mean, I've heard people refer to Thor Ragnarok as a spiritual, Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
So, which is funny because the actual Masters of the Universe movie, a lot of people has referred to that as a spiritual Jack Kirby's New Gods, like Apocalypse and all that. So it kind of goes. It's almost like a circular thing, and it was a fun movie. I laughed my ass off watching this. There is a lot of really funny moments and a lot of good character moments. I particularly like, Loki's development and Thor's. And I love that the Hulk is speaking. Yeah. That's my favorite bit. That the Hulk was in it and the Hulk was a character in his own right. And I have a soft spot for the Hulk. I think they were starting to go that route in Avengers, and then they kind of pulled back for Age of Ultron. But now Mark Ruffalo and Marvel, they're putting Hulk now through like a 3-film arc, starting with Thor Ragnarok. So you're going to see Hulk develop more as a character from there.
Yeah, and I think it was an interesting interpretation of Ragnarok. Just specifically Asgard's going to get destroyed. Not necessarily everyone in it.
Yeah, that was an interesting way to twist it, to keep the mythological and the event happening without making it a huge downer where everyone dies.
Yeah, and the fact that actually causing Ragnarok it was the goal. Like everyone thought like hell was bringing Ragnarok. No, it wasn't.
Yeah,
not really.
Spoilers if you haven't seen it yet, but yeah, that they decide things have gotten so bad, just screw it. It's almost it's almost like the Hulk. Things have gotten so bad that the Hulk couldn't possibly make things any worse.
Literally ending our world did not make things worse.
Yeah. Well, again, spoilers if you haven't seen it, but it was an interesting way to do it. And yeah, I think overall, very solid movie. I enjoyed it. They kind of, though...
Yeah, they've had some missteps.
Well, not necessarily missteps. What they said going into it was they were not making Thor 3. They were making Thor Ragnarok. So they kind of threw out a lot of... Like, they were not making a progression from the first two movies. They were making just a new movie. Yeah. And it's kind of in there where the first two movies, they go to a lot about... establishing, our magic and science, it's really the same thing. In the second movie, Jane's on the thing, and they call it a soul forge, but she recognizes what it is and what it does, and she has a scientific name for it. And they go into a lot of, these are just highly advanced aliens, whereas the third movie goes more into the magic, Thor insisting he's a god, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of like rolled back, not necessarily a retcon, because magic clearly was a thing that Loki was doing. It was referred to as magic consistently.
Yeah.
But they definitely roll back the whole, we're just advanced aliens and more into, okay, maybe we are mythological creatures. Yeah. Especially with the prophecy and everything. That, well, I guess they started that in Age of Ultron.
Yeah. And
there were... We're talking really well about the movie, but... There were things that both of us...
Come on.
Yeah, for one, it was a funny movie, but the tone... I think if you're blowing up a major setting and basically, the end of the world and killing... And they do kill off some characters. I think the comedy was a little over the top there, and there were a lot of moments that I feel should have remained dramatic, that did not need the comedic subversion of it. Some of them were really funny.
Yeah,
but some of them, I think, would have worked better if it was just like they played it straight.
Yeah, and one thing, probably the biggest criticism this movie has got is what happens with the Warriors 3.
Yeah, spoiler alert again.
Yeah, well, spoiler if you haven't watched the first 5 minutes, but they deserve
go down
a much
in about
bigger,
10 seconds.
Yeah, they deserve a much better role. Not even just send off. I mean, just a better role.
Yeah, these were characters established over the last two movies. They're like Thor's closest friends, capable fighters, probably the most capable fighters next to Thor himself. And two of them literally don't even get to have lines. Hela just kills them outright when she shows up. Hogun at least puts up a fight and gets in a few swings on her. But they're just killed out of hand, to up the drama and the stakes. Yeah. And then again, the comedic tone comes back in, and they're kind of forgotten about it.
Thor has nothing to say about it.
Yeah, he doesn't even know. They're killed off, and then the movie forgets about them entirely.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure people got tired of the whole Worf effect with Worf.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Sometimes you do have to establish it so that you're not saying, "Well, why don't you just smack him down?"
Well,
so you had to establish
because she blew up the hammer. You don't blow up the hammer and then just get taken down by the traditional way.
I think it does establish Hela. Hela is a goddess of death. She's not going to fight somebody to a standstill. It's going to be death one way or the other. She's not. So I think. It was probably necessary for them to die to establish,
or at least one of them.
Well, it's the Warriors 3. I can see them going down together, and I would have liked. I think it would have been better if, Hogan gets his last stand. He gets to fight one-on-one with her for a couple minutes. I think it would have worked better if the three of them took her on there instead of the two of them getting, knocked out as doorstops.
Or better yet, helping Heimdall.
Yeah, they could have had a more active, a better role than what they got. They were killed off. The bridge dropped on them, and it just does not sit well with me how they handled that.
Well, the way Kevin Feige puts it, it's we did this, the up tension. I'm
There was some tension. I did feel the tension later on. I figured Heimdall was going down.
Yeah, but that was built up. Yeah, that's built up. This isn't built up. These aren't red shirts. You talk about these are characters that are Thor's closest friends, and again, able warriors, and we're going to see like 5 seconds of screen time with them.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you're right, it's not built up, and then it's not followed up on. They're dead, and the moment the camera's off them, they may as well have not existed.
Yeah, it
They're
might as well have been red shirts.
They're not like acknowledged. No one mentions it. Heimdall doesn't say it to Thor. It's over too quickly, and they're not treated the way they deserved.
Yeah,
but at least they're in the movie.
And I hear the whole darker and edgy argument, but Thor was goofy from the start.
Yeah, and I like that the Marvel movies, even when they do get dark, are still fun.
Yeah,
they don't dwell in moping and brooding like a certain guy who dresses like a bat. Like even Civil War takes what they've done a couple times, both in Civil War and Age of Ultron. They've taken fights from the comic, where in the comic it's like a terribly dramatic and traumatic battle, and they make them hilarious. Like the Hulk versus the Hulkbuster is one of the funniest parts of Age of Ultron. The big fight at the airport in Civil War is hilarious because you have Spider-Man on one side and Ant-Man on the other. It's going to be funny. Yeah. So the MCU can do drama and lightness at the same time, but I think Ragnarok at times was just off balance there.
Yeah, and to me, this was almost the best movie of the year, but for those reasons, it shoots itself in the foot.
Yeah, it's something that Guardians did better.
Yeah,
Guardians is also a goofy and funny movie, but they knew when to scale it back and be dramatic.
I mean, I still recommend people watch it, but again, your expectations, just keep them down.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a good movie. I would still highly recommend it. It's still very funny. It's still, the action's really good, and Thor is still a badass.
Yeah.
But, I think the tone could have used some adjustment.
Yeah, and, again, characters we already know could have been expanded. I did hear, Sif's not in it at all.
Yeah, and so at least she doesn't get the bridge dropped on her.
Though, I read something interesting. Basically, she was literally on a different continent working on Blind Spot.
Yeah, she's in the TV series Blind Spot, so she's been busy with that. So it's understandable that it's conflicts of scheduling.
Yeah, and the way she put it sounded like it was basically a last minute. Hey, do you want to join Ragnarok? And she's like, kind of busy, but she did say like I love. I love the people working on Marvel, and who doesn't want to be a superhero?
Yeah, and Sif, Kevin Feige has said that Sif was banished by Loki, who was posing as Odin before she could figure out his secret. So the door is open for her to return. She's still alive out there somewhere, and the character and the actress have been on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. a couple times. So there's a possibility she could end up there. Or she could show up in Infinity War,
which I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I do hope she comes back. I remember hearing somewhere that the role that Valkyrie plays in the movie was originally written for Sif. So I don't know how true that is, but that would have been an interesting role for her. So I like Jamie Alexander. I think she's done well with what she has had to do with Sif. So I would like to see her come back in the role. And I think if the door is open, I think they would go for it.
And while we're talking about Thor in general, I feel like Thor: Dark World has had the most grief out of all the Marvel films.
Well, among them, it's probably I think it's got the worst Rotten Tomatoes rating.
Yeah.
It's probably the least regarded. So, and I can kind of see why. I enjoy it. I still enjoy it when I see it.
Yeah. But I will defend this movie. I mean, there is dumb in this movie. Don't get me wrong, but it kind of feels more consistent in tone. It kind of just stays adventurous, all throughout. And I do feel this is probably Loki's best movie.
I don't know about that. I kind of like him more in Ragnarok because of the character development kind of comes to fruition there.
I kind of feel like he was phoning it in, well, not the actor, but the character, just like being completely unsubtle as Odin for some reason.
Well, he was caught off guard,
being completely ineffective to Thor, just not being able to trick him at all.
Well, Thor's been going through this for a long time. Loki has been tricking Thor probably since they were toddlers. At some point, Thor has either got to catch on or he's just really thick.
And his scene, his reaction to Freya's death.
Frigga.
Frigga. To her death and everything else. I feel Loki had his strongest scenes in this movie. You see him after the Avengers mess, how he still carries himself, and you do get hints of what I like is looking back in retrospect, you get hints of what Odin was back in the day.
He kind of loses it a little bit after Frigga dies,
and like father, like son. His father toward the Dark Elves. So even though the Dark Elves, they literally cannot really live with the Asgardians, there's still genocide in their past now. Yeah,
and Odin is a little too eager to let the Asgardians die too in Thor the Dark World. But I will say you are right in that Thor the Dark World is almost as much of a Loki movie as it is a Thor movie.
Yeah.
It shows a lot of... It's probably the movie where Loki starts back on the upward trend.
Yeah.
Where he just helps Thor without actually betraying him. And, he has that dying speech, which comes off as really sincere, especially where he's saying, I didn't do it for Odin. So I think at that point in the movies, Loki might still hate Odin, but he's kind of warming up to Thor now, partly because Thor... I think Loki, as a younger brother, is someone who, on some level or another, has mixed feelings between idolizing his brother and, being really jealous of his brother. So when Thor comes to him and is like, I know you're going to betray me and I'm going to kill you when you do, it's kind of a shot to Loki where, almost, this is how far I've gone, how far I've fallen, where, he sees me for what I am. And I think that and the one line in Ragnarok where he goes, you'll always be the god of mischief, but you could be so much more, is kind of where Loki kind of starts redeeming himself.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like, yes, a love plot. In retrospect, it wasn't really necessary to Thor the Dark World. It could have easily just had, say, Sif accidentally come across it, and do it, or really any other character. But I will say, I still have less complaints about this love plot than I did in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, there is at least some chemistry, some mutual attraction, and Jane Foster is a capable character in her own right for what she does.
Yeah, and yeah, it's oh, that love plot was horrible. You guys have no memory.
Yeah, there are worse love plots out there. And, it is kind of funny seeing Thor be almost like the jealous boyfriend. Who's Richard? Really? Really? That's where you got to go right now?
Yeah. We really need to talk about this right now.
Yeah, I think it kind of shows, Thor is a little more human in that movie than he is the first one. And it's kind of like a more relaxed Thor in the Dark World.
I would say a more mature Thor. I feel Thor 2 is better than Thor 1 in a couple ways. I feel it's just better paced. We get to see Thor just being Thor.
Yeah, I always like the bits in the movie where the hero gets to just be the hero, where, that just, even if it's just a montage of them just doing their thing for a while, that's often my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah. So, don't kill me, Internet. I know I've said some, hostility-inducing things tonight, but...
So, yeah, the Dark World, I think... The thing about the Dark World, it may well be the worst MCU movie, but that still puts it way above a lot of other movies.
I would personally rate Iron Man 2 lower.
I wouldn't.
Iron Man 2 was kind of all over the place. It was... Well, I think it's more in retrospect. I think... I watched it recently, and it didn't really feel like Black Widow was really... She didn't really quite have... her step or her rhythm.
Well, it wasn't her movie. She was kind of it was kind of introducing her character to the world. So it wasn't really her, like, it wasn't her movie, basically.
Well, I just, I'm stuck on an island. Which we would rather have? Thor 2, personally.
Are those two the only options?
Well, just compare the two. I mean, let's see. Well, okay, I would still maybe rate a little higher than Incredible Hulk.
See, I like Incredible Hulk more. I like I said, I have a soft spot for the green guy, and I like the Hulk when Banner starts getting control of him and can turn him into an ally and not just a weapon to be pointed.
Then you would probably just point him more towards, say, Avengers.
Yeah, Avengers is kind of where
Incredible
Hulk is that.
Well, because in the Incredible Hulk, that's precisely what he does again. Things have gone to complete shit. I'm just going to aim this guy at whatever, as opposed to in the Avengers, where he's just like, I'm just going to be the Hulk.
Yeah, well, the Incredible Hulk is where he starts on that. Where he's in the helicopter, he's like, well, maybe I can aim it, and he starts to accept the Hulk. And the Hulk in that sequence is, if not lucid, that's where he says his first words, Hulk smash. And he is a character. I think that's where the character of the Hulk starts, and I think that's the important thing. That's where they sow the seeds for the Hulk to become the Hulk he is now.
Well, I will say, even the worst Marvel film is pretty damn good.
Yeah, I would probably take the worst Marvel film even over the best DCEU film at this point. Although with Wonder Woman, that would be a close one.
Yeah, before Wonder Woman, I'll definitely agree with you.
Although I still haven't seen Justice League, fingers crossed for that. The reviews are starting to come out, and the most charitable thing I've seen is it's inconsistent but fun, which I'll take it.
Really, so was the first Avengers. People will point out like small plot holes, and you know what? Here's the thing about plot holes. It's not the mark of a good story that has zero, though it helps if you don't have any. Does the presentation make you completely forget the plot holes?
Yeah, it's a two-edged thing.
Because people point out about the first, say, the first Predator movie. Ultimately, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for an alien to just go to a planet, start hunting, but it presents itself so well, it paces itself so well that you don't question it.
Sure, it makes sense. Why do people go to Africa to go hunting?
Well, this is like an early review I'm quoting. Like, something, when a movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you don't care, that is movie magic done right.
I think that's a better example of that is Signs, where the first time you're watching it, and even now when you're watching it, it's still tense and terrifying. It's only afterward you start, figuring out that it's kind of stupid.
Yeah, again, if a movie can really present itself so well, like I think Expendables 2 is another one that was just fun.
Yeah, that's the epitome of stupid action movie.
Yeah, Commando. Again, presentation. And this is a superhero movie.
Yeah, it's going to be a little over the top. It's going to be more about spectacle than about depth. So next, I guess, for the MCU, I think Infinity War is next, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think that people
I've been waiting for that since, 2012?
Yeah, everyone has. So that one, the worry there is that it's going to be too many characters, but I think so far, Marvel's earned the benefit of the doubt, and I have high hopes for it, much higher than for Justice League.
Well, we have gone over the whole. I've said before, curb your expectations. Not every character is going to get the proper screen time. But at the same time, we still know these characters.
Yeah, even if they're there and have one line, they have 2-3 movies behind them.
Yeah, and again, it avoids the Mortal Kombat Annihilation problem where you have so many characters, most of them are killed off, and we don't know anything about them.
Yeah, so we will probably have our own episode just about Infinity War, which will probably be just the two of us geeking out. But for now, I think we've talked enough. You're tired of hearing of us. I'm tired of hearing myself.
Yeah, and some of you probably still close your eyes. How could you say that about Spider-Man 2? Or something like that.
Anyway, I'm Mike Curley.
This is Frank Curley.
This has been the C-Team.
Hi. We are back on the air.
Shit.